Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's going to be slightly different for a top list. It's not a top 10. I'm going to give you 19 series to look at. So I was a little bit curious the other day and I decided to just play around in Excel because I've got a spreadsheet with all of the ratings that I've given my books. And for those who are familiar with the channel, or at least the dedicated reviews that I give to books, I started to include a few months back the weighted ratings that I give to a book, as well as what I call the gut feeling score, which is the rating out of 5 stars. So I was thinking the other day, how would it look if I averaged out those scores? So I literally took every series where I've rated 2 or more books from the series in my weighted ratings table, and I've averaged out the score and also the rank for each of those books. There are 19 different series that I have rated at least 2 books for using my weighted ratings table, which I have been using for nearly 10 years now, although I did have a couple of years off when I was having a bit of a reading slump and I wasn't really reviewing books. So there's plenty of books to choose from. Given us 19 series, let's go and have a look how they fare. So I've got my handy little list in front of me to refer to, a stack of books on the floor down the side of me, but the first series that comes up on the list in 19th position I no longer have any physical copies for because I got rid of them years ago. This is the Shannara series. So this was the Sword of Shannara, the Elfstones of Shannara, and the Wish Song of Shannara. And although I do include 3 books in this average, I actually swapped out Sword of Shannara because after 3 attempts I never actually got to finishing that one, and I put in the Last King, I think it was called, of Shannara as kind of a prequel one. So those are the 3 books that are included in this, and they come out with an average rating of 66.33% and an average rank of 47. So this series was okay, but it wasn't great. There was nothing really kind of new in there, nothing really outstanding for me. It was enjoyable, but it's not one that I'm ever going to really have in the conversation as one of my top series. Next up in 18th position is a series by Brian Staveley, The Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne, of which I feature 2 books because I think it was book 3, The Last Mortal Bond, that I didn't actually record in my weighted ratings whilst I was having a bit of a reading slump. This series though is another good series. I did quite enjoy it. I did actually include this as well in my top 10 series list, pretty much on the strength of this opening book in the series. I really like the idea here with the Ketrel, these giant birds, and the warriors pretty much strapped to their talons, I think it was, and it just made for a really good book. I wasn't quite so keen on the next 2 books. It did take a few little turns that didn't quite work out for me, but overall I did definitely enjoy this series. So The Chronicles of the Unhewn Throne by Brian Staveley is the first of 3 series that came out with an average score of 69.5%. So in the rankings for this video, I've ordered them based on the average rank as well, which for this series was 41.5. Coming in just above that in 17th place with an average rank of 41.0, but that same average score for 2 books of 69.5%, we have the Demon Cycle series by Peter V. Brett. So I included 2 books in this rating, which I think were books 3 and 4, The Daylight War and The Skull Throne. And this is a series that many years ago, when I didn't have nearly as many fantasy books under my belt, this is one that was in my top list. I really enjoyed The Painted Man, or The Warded Man as it is in some parts of the world. It was a really interesting concept with these demons that come out at night and these wards that people put around their properties to keep the demons out. The series is another one that for me took a turn with some of the decisions that were made, some of the directions that it went to. So for me, where I normally find that I enjoy a series the deeper I get into it, it was the exact opposite with this. Each book for me was a little bit less good than the previous one. So The Demon Cycle by Peter V. Brett finds itself relatively low on this table. In 16th position with an average rank of 40 and that average score of 69.5 is The Lightbringer by Brent Weeks. So this one again has 2 books in the table. I gave weighted ratings last year to books 2 and 3, The Blinding Knife and The Broken Eye. And this is a series that I did decide to DNF after that 3rd book because it was another one that I didn't really like where it was going after enjoying the opening book in the series and finding enough in book 2 for me to want to carry on. Book 3, I was just bored at too many points as I was listening to this on audiobook, and I just couldn't bring myself to do any more of it. So Lightbringer by Brent Weeks is one with a really interesting magic system, a really good bit of world building, but the writing of it just didn't quite do it for me. In 15th place is going to be maybe a shock to some people, but scoring an average rating of 70.5 and an average rank of 39.5, we have the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. I've only read the first two of these, so where I say the trilogy, I have only rated Assassin's Apprentice and Royal Assassin. These I did enjoy, but I found that they didn't move quickly enough and they didn't excite me enough. For both of these books that I rated, most of them I found that they just trundled along a little bit for the first 80 or 85% before they got really exciting just towards the end. I prefer to have the excitement pretty much throughout the whole book, so it didn't quite work for me. I'm still enjoying it though. I'm still going to read the third book, and presumably at some point I will be continuing on with the other books in the other series in the realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, but I'm not going to be rushing to do that. I'm going to take my time and read some other books first, because I'll probably need a break after reading the big chunky third book in this series as well. In 14th position, with an average score of 71 for two books in this duology and an average rank of 37.5, we find the final series in the Rift War cycle, the Chaos War Saga, which ends with Magician's End as the final book in Raymond E. Feist's Rift War series. Now, this one has long been one of my favourite kind of overall series, and again I included this, or at least the first two kind of main Feist solo series, which is the Rift War Saga and the Serpent War Saga. I included those two as a combined entry in my top 10 series list because I had a really good time with those. The follow-up series, as we started to get through this 31 book saga, I did find that they started to drop off in quality towards the end, and of course the Chaos War Saga is the very end of that. So this one wasn't as good as some of its predecessors, but still a series that I did enjoy as a finale to some of these characters, some of these events, and of course as a last visit to the world of Midkemia, where I've spent so much of my time growing up reading those books. In 13th position, again this one might be a surprise to some, scoring an average rating of 73% for three books in a trilogy and an average rank of 35. We have the First Law Trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. This took me a long time to read. I think there was something like 7 years, maybe a bit more, in between me reading the first book and the third book in this trilogy. I don't know why it took me so long, but there we have it. Overall, I really enjoyed this. I didn't include it in my top 10 series list, although it would definitely have been around the 11 or 12 mark if I did expand that list. I liked so much about this book. There were bits that I didn't like, and one of the main characters, Boyaz, for anyone who's interested, I just didn't like at all. I didn't like reading his sections, but I loved some of the work that we got in here with the Northmen as one of my favourite parts of the series overall. So I've continued with Best Served Cold so far, and I will be revisiting the rest of Joe Abercrombie's First Law world at some point as well, but this one finds itself 13th in my average table. Just ahead of that in 12th, with an average rating of 75% for two books and an average rank of 30, we have the Lacanius by James Islington. I still need to read the third book in this series and see whether this average goes up or down, but I've enjoyed my time in these. They are quite chunky books, and that's maybe why I've not quite got round to finishing this series yet, but it will be done soon. I like the magic in here, and I like the way that we've got a couple of different kind of aspects to it, and some of the other details of this world are really intriguing. So I am looking forward to that third book, but I just haven't got round to it yet. Next up in 11th, with an average rating of 75.5% and an average rank of 28.5. This one I've only read two of, but it's the Tides Child Trilogy by R.J. Barker. I'm currently in the middle of the third book, and I can see this one rising in the averages. It'll be interesting to see how far it rises in this table, but I did enjoy this first book in the series, The Bone Chips, although I felt that it just threw a little bit too much at me with the heavy world building that we got here. Book 2 definitely did better with that. It was more story and more character based rather than focusing on the world building as so much, because all of that work had been done in this book. So I'm having a really good time so far with book 3. I'm about 25 to 30% through it. So yeah, I'm interested to see, as I say, how far this one rises when I finish that book. Okay, so into the top 10 then, and kicking us off we have The Draenei by David Gemmell, one of my all-time favourite authors. This series, I've got 3 books that I rated with an average of 76.33% and an average rank of 26.67. So I did a reread of Legend, the opening book in the kind of Draenei chronology in terms of publication order at least. I also read Winter Warriors, which I really enjoyed. That was just a really good book for me. And this one, Hero in the Shadows, is the 3rd book in the Waylander kind of sub-series to the Draenei Saga. Overall, I really like this world. They are all different. You do tend to get a different set of characters for the most part in each of the books because they cover such a wide period of time. So it's not a series of 10 or 15 or however many books it is that are all set in a short space of time with characters and events that you see progressing through each of them. We do get a different kind of timeline for most of the books, and I do like that, although of course sometimes you do get favourite characters who you only see in 1, maybe 2 books and you just want to see more of them. Overall though, I definitely recommend David Gemmell's work, and in particular the Draenei series, for anyone who's got a hankering for some good classic fantasy. 9 and 10 are both series that I don't yet have physical copies of, but I am working on that. In 9th, with 3 books rated, we have the Cridex Argos by Alicia Wansell-Burke. These come out with an average rating of 77% and an average position in my Hall of Fame of 26.33. I really enjoyed this trilogy at the end of last year, and I said earlier on how I tend to enjoy a series more the deeper I get into it, and this series is one where I definitely felt that. Each book significantly improved on the previous one as far as my enjoyment goes and as far as the ratings go, with book 3, Empire of Shadows, scoring really well and getting close to the top 10 in my single book list. So a really good self-published series. If you haven't read this one, you can check out my reviews of book 1 and book 3 in the review section on my channel. I highly recommend that you do take a look. And then in 8th in the list, it's another self-published series. This one only has 2 books rated because the 3rd book hasn't yet been released, but coming in with an average rating of 79% and an average rank of 21 in my Hall of Fame, we have Threadlight by Zach Argyle. I've mentioned this one so many times, and again, you can check out reviews that I've done for both of the books, Voice of War and Stones of Light, elsewhere on my channel. With this one, I really love both the world building with the magic and also the characters that we get here, and for me it's got some character work that I just haven't seen in other series. It is really well thought out and well written. I can't wait for Bonds of Chaos book 3 in this series, and I've pretty much already made up my mind that once I've finished that 3rd book in the series, Threadlight will move across to my top 10 series because I am enjoying it so much. It is that good, and I just know that Zach Argyle is going to stick the landing with this 3rd book. In 7th place in my list, with an average rating of 80.5% and an average rank of 21.25, so just below Threadlight on the average rank, we have Shadows of Yapt by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This one I rated 3 books, the last 3 in the series, plus a 4th, which was a reread of Empire in Black and Gold last year. This is one of my top series. In fact, I ranked it 2nd, I think it was, in my overall list. So I love this one. The world building is amongst the best that I have ever read. So I really had a good time with this. I love the characters in this and their interactions, but also the different types of characters you get in terms of the insect kingdom, which make this series so unique. I know a lot of people have been enjoying this recently as part of a read along with the Library of Alexandria, and I'm glad that it's got a lot of new fans. I can't wait for more of them to finish this series as they're slowly going through it, because it is a 10-book series and some of them are pretty chunky books, but I'm loving hearing about it on Discord when friends finish another book in the series each time. So definitely one that comes recommended for me, and it sits at 7th in this average list. In 6th position then, with an average rating of 81.5% and an average rank of 18.5, it's my first John Gwynne entry. It's the Bloodsworn Saga, and this one I just finished a week or so ago, book 2, The Hunger of the Gods, and you can see my dedicated review up in the cards in the top corner. And this is another series with some brilliant world building. That is the key part of it for me, the real strength of this series. There are some great characters. I love the storyline as well, but the world building is just right up there. It is really, really well done. I love these giant dead gods and the bones of power that they have, and the Norse inspired magic of this world. It's just really good. If you haven't read John Gwynne, you can start with this one, Shadow of the Gods, and go into the Bloodsworn, although of course book 3, the final book I believe in the series, won't be out for some time yet, but it's definitely well worth a read. The writing style is very different from John Gwynne's other works, so if you are familiar with the Faithful and the Fallen and Of Blood and Bone, I know some people who love that but don't get on with this, so it is very much different. I enjoyed them both, but for me this one definitely comes lower down the list. Into the top 5 then, and at 5 we have a 4-book series that I read last year. This one scores an average of 82.25% and an average rank of 15.75. It's The Greatcoats by Sebastian de Castell. I really had a great time with this. I've spoken about it several times. I didn't do dedicated reviews for these because it was just before I started my channel, but I read Traitor's Blade, and then I read the 2nd, 3rd and 4th books back to back during a readathon, and I didn't really have the time to go through and dissect them for a dedicated review. But the overall world in here I thought was pretty good. The main draw of it though is the storyline and of course the characters. In here we have Falkio, we have Brasti, we have Kest. We have some other characters who join as what I would call main characters as well, but those 3 as our central trio just really do it for me. The banter that they have, which I do love in my books, as mentioned before with the Northmen from First Law, and as we'll see with another entry still to come in this table, some good banter between the characters is one of the things that really makes a book enjoyable for me. So this one has it in spades, and the overall story as well is just really, really good. It's one of the few series that has threatened to make me cry, just bringing a tear to my eye, just with some of the real rousing speeches that we have within these books. So if you haven't read The Greatcoats, I mean, Traitor's Blade is quite a thin book to start off with. The other 3 books in the series are definitely longer, but it comes highly recommended from me. Okay, so moving on to number 4, and we have the highest ranked self-published series in this list, coming in with an average rating of 84.5% and an average rank in my Hall of Fame of 15. This is The Bound and the Broken by Ryan Cahill. So I know a handful of people who've read book 1 in the series of Blood and Fire and they weren't really sold, but have then gone on to read the prequel novella The Fall and then this one of Darkness and Light, and their opinion has really turned around. They've mentioned a vast improvement in the writing style as one of the key factors of that. Now, reading of Blood and Fire, I didn't really have a problem with the writing style, but I definitely rated this book a lot higher because the story just didn't let down at all. We started off with a bang and we just kept on moving. So this one, I know my good friend Patrick Ryan has quite aptly described it as if Eragon was written by John Gwynne. So that gives you a bit of an idea. I don't generally like to compare books or compare authors in that way, but for this one, I think, as I say, it is quite an apt one. Number 3 in my average list is a bit of a divisive one, I find. I know a lot of people like me who love this series, and then I know a lot of people as well who just really don't get it. It doesn't work for them, which is absolutely fine because everyone is different, every book is different, and people have different opinions. That's healthy. But for me, I loved this one. It's one that I spoke about a few moments ago in terms of great banter, really improving my enjoyment. And that's why I rate Ryra Revelations by Michael J. Sullivan as one of my top series. So this one comes in at number 3 with an average rating of 89.67 and an average rank of 7. Because I've got 2 of these books, I think, in my top 10 on my weighted rating scale. And the enjoyment and the character categories are the ones that really elevate this series because they both scored really highly for me, largely because of the way that Royce and Hadrian, as our 2 central characters, get along with each other, the way they interact and the banter that they have literally from the first paragraph of this opening book in the series. So I know, as I say, that a lot of people don't get on with Michael J. Sullivan. I myself haven't actually got on with the rest of his work that I've tried. The prequel series to this, the Ryra Chronicles I think it was called, and also Nolan, which is the first book in a trilogy of standalones. I read that one last year and really didn't get on with it. But this trilogy, or 6 books if you like, because each one of these is a bind up of 2 that were originally self-published, this is one that I really enjoy. So into the top 2 then, and at number 2 in my average list with an average rating of 90% for 4 books and an average position in the list of 6.25 is John Gwynne with The Faithful and the Fallen. So anyone who knows me kind of even just a little bit, I guess, in terms of my reading taste, know that this is my favourite series. So I know some of you will probably therefore be wondering why this is at number 2 on my list, and of course there'll be some of you who've got a pretty good guess at the reason why. I rated Malice at I think it was 81%, and the remaining 3 books in this series were all in the 90s. So Malice did just drop down the average for this series, but overall it's still my favourite, and I love pretty much every aspect of it. The Celtic inspired world that we have here just really works well for me, and I love the characters and the overall story, even though people sometimes complain about it being very tropey. I mean, it is a fantasy series, so you do generally get a lot of tropes in fantasy, but I did not have an issue with any of the tropes in here. I love the way that they were used and kind of subverted, and overall it was just a really enjoyable time. So number 1 in my average list then, for those who haven't already worked it out, comes in with an average rating of 92.67 for 3 books and an average rank of 4 in my all-time list. And it's the follow-up series to The Faithful and the Fallen. It's the Of Blood and Bone trilogy by John Gwynne. So again, we're in the same world here. We've even got some of the same characters as we had in our second entry in this list. So this was always going to be a winner for me. A lot of people don't like this one as much, largely I guess because we've moved on a couple of 100 years, so the majority of the characters that we had in The Faithful and the Fallen, they're not around any longer by the time this one's set. I didn't have a problem with that though. I loved the new characters that we did have. I loved the new storyline that we had, kind of as an extension actually of the storyline in the Faithful and the Fallen series. And I didn't have a problem with that as well, by the way. I like the way that it was kind of combined with the Faithful and Fallen as one long series with a bit of a gap in between. So for me, you can read the first 4 books, The Faithful and Fallen, back to back, and then you can read these 3 books in Of Blood and Bone back to back as well, and almost treat them as 2 books in a massive duology. And that I really do appreciate. Overall, this is a fantastic series. I do rate it in my personal list lower than The Faithful and the Fallen, but we started off with ratings around the 90s with this one, rather than having that initial kind of lower rating that Malice got for the first series. So that's the reason this one comes out on top of the 2, but overall, of course, it's a triumph for John Gwynne. So there we have the 19 series that I've rated 2 or more books for in my weighted rating system, all ranked based on the average score that their books received. Let me know in the comments down below if there are any surprises here. Obviously I did mention a couple that came up that people might be surprised they're a bit low, but I just didn't enjoy those books as much as some people did, and that's absolutely fine. I will continue to keep my eye on this every so often when I finish new books in series. A new series become eligible for this list because I've read 2 or more books for them. If you like this video, this idea, let me know, and I'll provide updates maybe in a year's time, because I'm not going to do this all the time of course, but if you are interested in seeing the updates to the table as I continue to read books, let me know and I'll see what I can do. In the description box below this video, I'm going to include quite a few links. I'll mention my friend Patrick Ryan and his review for Of Blood and Fire, so I'll link that one in the description box. If you haven't seen it, go and check out his review. I'll also link a couple of my reviews for some of the books that I mentioned within this series table, and also the video where I went through my weighted ratings, which kind of explains the data that I've used to compile this list. So go check that one out if you haven't already done so as well. Don't forget also to check out the additional links in there for all my social media channels, where you can connect with me on Twitter, on Instagram and on Goodreads. The support the channel links, and also if you're in the UK, I have an affiliate link now with Black Dragon Books. This is an independent store specialising in fantasy and sci-fi, and they give some really good discounts, as well as donating a portion of the profit for each book sold to Book Trust. So definitely have a look at them when you're next interested in buying a fantasy or sci-fi book. And if you use the affiliate link in the description box below my videos, it doesn't impact the price that you pay at all. It just means that I get a small commission for each sale that I'll then be able to put towards new books of my own, giving you another roundabout way of supporting the channel. That's it for today though. Thank you very much for your time. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'll hopefully see you again soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.